All right, we are live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Good Medicine Way. We're so glad that you all are able to join us. Let's see. We are. What is the thing for this? I'm sorry.
The tribes originally here were the Sandia and Isleta Pueblos.
Okay, but let's see.
Still the Tewa people.
The Tewa people, yes, and we have the Tewa, the Dene, the Apache people. We have the Mescalero Apache to the south. We have the Jicarilla Apache to the north. The Dene over to our west, and here is the 19 pueblos within this area: the Zia, the Zuni, the Acoma, the Sandia. And I don't remember the rest.
Lots more.
Great. Introduce yourself.
Okay. Mike Taguvin, Duayak, Muni Kaveni, Muni Bamanok, Halmi Dakyapi, Lam Paltuki, Yushkiana, Pechiuzapi, Lewatiki El Diomani, Pina Diaglape, Noah Akitao. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelsey Lubeth Monroe Jocko. My Indian name is Umpa de Daka, which means White Star in the Pawnee language. A lot of you know me from here as Umpa de Daka. And I originally came from the Four Corners area, but I currently reside in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. We were up here for the Luminaria display at San Juan College in Farmington. We were asked to come and be here live in person. So I have my daughter here, Kisa Morningstar. She's over there coloring. So we're really, really happy that we were able to be here and finally get to experience this in a live setting. So we're very excited, and I just wanted to welcome all the new members to the family and everybody who comes in every single week. Welcome back. Now we'll go into the 4 directions prayer from Chief Seattle. Great Spirit of Light, come to me out of the east with the power of the rising sun. Let there be light in my words. Let there be light on my path that I walk. Let me remember always that you give the gift of a new day, and never let me be burdened with sorrow by not starting over again. Great Spirit of creation, send me the warm and soothing winds from the south. Comfort me and caress me when I am tired and cold. Unfold me like the gentle breezes that unfold the leaves on the trees. As you give to all the earth your warm, moving wind, give to me so that I may grow close to you in warmth. Great life-giving Spirit, I face the west, the direction of sundown. Let me remember every day that the moment will come when my sun will go down. Never let me forget that I must fade into you. Give me a beautiful color. Give me a great sky for setting, so that when it is my time to meet you, I can come with glory. Great Spirit of love, come to me with the power of the north. Make me courageous when the cold winds fall upon me. Give me strength and endurance for everything that is harsh, everything that hurts, everything that makes me squint. Let me move through life ready to take what comes from the north. Man did not create the web of life. He is but a strand in it. Whatever man does to the web, he does to himself. And that was Chief Seattle's 4 directions prayer. So, okay, so next I get to experience this in person. I'm so excited. We will be turning over to the Grovers, who will give us 2 songs. So go ahead, take it away, Grovers.
All right. So since we're talking about black elk, we thought we'd use that as an excuse to do some songs that are about the ghost dances. I don't know if Damian's going to talk about the ghost dance tonight or not, but black elk is often associated with that. So 2 of the more well-known songs was one by Robbie Robertson and one by Bill Miller. And so we're going to be trying to do both of those, and I will put the words up. Sorry to Facebook people, the video will probably go blank while I screen share. When Damian screen shares, you'll be able to see it. So you'll be able to see his presentation, but when I screen share the lyrics locally, it always seems to mess up the Facebook stream. But, all right. Here we go.
Crow has brought the message to the children of the sun for the return of the buffalo and a better day to come. Now you can kill my body, you can damn my soul for not believing in your God. And so, oh, down below, you don't stand a chance against my prayer. You don't stand a chance against my love. They outlaw the ghost dance, but we shall live again. We shall live again. Sister above, she has red veins. She died of a wounded knee like some Latter-day Saint. Hear the big drum in the distance. Blackbirds in the sky. That's the sound that you hear when the buffalo cries. You don't stand a chance against my prayers. You don't stand a chance Said, where are we going? To a ghost dance in the snow. And all our mighty warriors are finally coming home. Where I'm going, you don't need to raise your voice. No starvation, there's plenty to eat. No guns, no wars, no hateful noise. Just a victory dance and every taste of defeat. With nothing done or said that can't be forgiven. Every step you take's on sacred ground. Walk away from death to the land of the living. Where all the lost tribes are finally found. So where are you going? To a ghost dance in the snow. You are a mighty warrior, and you're finally coming home. So where are we going? To a ghost dance in the snow. You are a mighty warrior, and you're finally coming home. Way out, hey, out, way out, hey, out, hey. Way out, hey, out, way out, hey, out, hey. Way out, hey, out, way out, hey, out, oh. Way out, hey, out, way out, hey, out, hey. I said, where are we going? To a ghost dance in the snow. All mighty warriors are finally coming home. Are finally coming home. Yes, we're finally coming home.
Wow. That was truly amazing to finally hear in person and get to feel that spirit moving. It was an amazing thing there. I think it's kind of interesting that that the Grovers have chosen to talk about the ghost dance, because I was actually watching Lakota Woman the other night, and the holy man, Leonard Crow Dog, he talks about how the ghost dance actually started with a vision from a Paiute man. And he tells the story, and in the movie, they go around dancing. And I know it, recently in my life, I was really interested in understanding what that means. Because the reason I'm wearing the hand across my face is because one of my cousins was actually murdered by her boyfriend. She was 5 months pregnant, and she was murdered on the 27th of November. And they just found her body yesterday. And it's a really, really tough thing. But the ghost dance is where we can bring back all of our loved ones that passed away. And we get to dance with them, and they give us the strength, because our people not only follow Creator, but we also have our ancestors to guide us. And I think that was a beautiful song choice by the Grovers, to talk about the ghost dance, the thing that was forbidden, but our people still did it, and our people still do it today. So yeah, now we're gonna move on to Leah McCoo, who will be showing us again the First Nations version Creator Sets Free Prayer, aka the Lord's Prayer. So go ahead and take it away, Leah.
You're muted right now, Leah.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to go slow. Sometimes I speed up, but I will also sometimes repeat things so that maybe it'll be easier to learn. Oh, great Spirit, our Father, from above, we honor your name as sacred and holy. Bring your good road where the beauty of your ways in the spirit world above is reflected in the earth below. Provide for us day by day the elk, the buffalo, and the salmon. The corn, the squash, one more time, SQU, squash, and wild rice. All the things we need for each day. Release us from the things we have done wrong. In the same way, we release others for things done wrong to us. Guide us away from things that tempt us to stray away from your good road. And set us free from the evil one and his worthless ways. Aho. May it be so. Great.
All right. Thank you so much for showing us that for the millionth time. Eh?
More every week.
Yeah, soon we're going to be able to do it. But yes, okay. Now moving on, we will be going to Casey Church, who will give us comments about the NAGPRA. So go ahead and take it away, Casey.
All right. Thank you. Pedadaki, you're doing a great job. Like you've always been there doing this. So let's give her a hand. Doing a great job. Yes, I want to briefly just share a little bit because it was just the anniversary of the signing of the bill for the NAGPRA, Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, done in, I think it was in November of 1990. And it was during that time I was beginning my time in my bachelor's degree at Grand Valley State University. And I was doing really well, So I took my anthropology classes, I took my archaeology classes, my osteology classes. Had to do that because we had to identify bones if we were able to find them in the ground. I also worked with the anthropologist on reclaiming and going to recoveries where bones had been found, sometimes during construction sites or where there was digging being happening, sometimes in fields. And there was one spot called Battle Point where remains were being unearthed because of the river was eating and gouging into the side of a bank where the remains were, or the mound group was. So during a summer in 1995, I had been doing pretty well, and since 1990, our professor had been trying to get going on all of the requirements of NAGPRA. It's a government program to have the remains and artifacts that were recovered over centuries and put into schools and collections to have them categorized and returned to the native peoples, and also the remains returned to the land. So this was the very beginning of this time frame, and the anthropologist friend of mine now, Jan Brashler, and called me aside into her office there and asked if I would be an assistant for a summer program. And here was the biggie, is that she wanted me go through, if I felt that I was able to, because I did well in my osteology class, to go and do an inventory of 62 remains of the native people that were recovered in that area in Michigan where the school was. And all of these bones have been collected in Grand Valley State University's collection for many, many years now. And so I was asked, but that's a big ask. He did it because I was a native person from that area and knew that I was a spiritual person as well. So I didn't give her an answer right away, but told her I would seek some counsel from some of my elders before I would make a decision. So part of that journey, and I did share this with Damian and his cohort here not too long ago about this little experience that I had. So I was able to talk with several of the local elders in the area, and one in particular, guided me and says, well, we would rather have you do it than some of the scientists that are there that only treat them as objects. And with you able to do it, you would treat them as your relatives. And that was a biggie for me. So I was able to work with the anthropologist in a big laboratory, open space with many tables. And during that time, I was able to take each individual box. Sometimes the remains were in garbage bags, and would be able to put them on a table. She gave me a lot of leeway, so I was able to pray every morning, was able to smudge inside the facility, use different cloths that I had, and taking care of the bones as if they were my own personal relatives, and doing it in a very good way. It was very emotional for me, being able to identify bones and then lay them out according to each person as they were a man, woman, young adult, child. And some of them, there were many. Some bones were not there, all there. Some were too deteriorated. But then there was this small box. There was a small box, kind of like a shoe box, a big shoe box. I think it was like a size 13 shoe too. It was a big shoe box. But inside that box, I didn't know what could have been left from the remains of one of our relatives. And this was of the people of the Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwe people in Michigan, southwest lower Michigan. So I opened the box and looked inside and came to tears as I looked at a small baby. And, all of these were unearthed to where they shouldn't have ever been unearthed, collected for science to be studied. And I was able to take that small little box full of these small little bones of this little baby and pray over them, carefully wrap them in red cloth, and put them in a separate little box with prayer, with sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and with prayers and smudging. It took me quite a while. It took several weeks to do all 62 remains. But after that was done, the anthropologist was able to do her part as an obligation of the government to return them to the tribes. There are so many particulars involved in that because they have to try to identify what group or what tribe they could have been gone to. But if you know anything about the land, at one time the Lakota people used to be in the Midwest, and they were slowly moved to the, little by little to the plains. But they used to be in our area there in Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana. And so to identify those remains as who they belonged to, the tribes in the area had a hard time making those claims on the remains. But eventually the bones and artifacts were returned to the people. There's so many different particulars in this that what's considered sacred, what can go with the tribe and what can go back in their graves. So many details. I was able to work with only just one portion of that, but that if you want to know more information about NAGPRA, I've asked Brian if you would find a site there. There are several videos that you can watch to know what's happening, because another part of this that's coming into play is the remains that are being found at all of the boarding school sites. It's like, how did they treat them? They go under the regulations of NAGPRA, or they go under the regulations of the Department of Interior and how they work with them. So a lot of litigation and a lot of things have to be done as far as the thousands of bones and remains that they're finding now. Hard to tell who they belong to because these children came from all parts of the country and were buried in these cemeteries. So I just wanted to share that, and it might have taken a little bit too long, but it was very important to me, and I was able to do something good. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Casey, for sharing. That's definitely something that our people, we really do need to talk about. I'm sorry that you had to go through that and had to experience what you did, and to see the little baby, and it really breaks my heart to hear. But thank you for being so strong and being able to do that, and still being able to come and tell us the story. May Creator watch over you and protect your spirit and your heart as you went through what you went through. I don't know. I don't really know what to say really after this. It's really heartbreaking. But I do recommend that everyone watches Lakota Woman on YouTube, because that also talks a little bit about unearthing things and anthropology, and it touches on so many different subjects. So I just want to throw that out there. Okay, let's see if we can keep going now. It reminds me of this time when we were at WJEF and they talked about the murdered and missing Indigenous relatives, and I didn't know where to go from there either. So, but yeah, thank you, Casey. Thank you.
I know they're pretty heavy topics, but maybe in the future here we could do, we might find a person who can talk into this topic, and then we can have more discussion.
Yes, yes. Okay, so everybody, pull out your First Nation version Bibles. We will be turning to page 473. we're going to be looking at Revelations. Revelations 22. I'll give you all just a moment to grab them. Okay, is everybody ready? Yes? All right, so I will be reading Creator's Word, Revelation 22, verses 1 through 5. The river of life-giving water. The Spirit messenger then showed me the river of life-giving water, shining as bright as crystal. It flowed out from the seat of honor of the Great Spirit and the Lamb. The river flowed down the center of the village's wide pathway. On each side of the river was the life-giving tree. Every moon this tree was bearing fresh fruit, 12 different crops a year. Its leaves were good medicine for the healing of all nations. No curse will be found here, for the seat of honor of the Great Spirit and the Lamb will be in that village. And in that place, his people will honor him with their service. They will see his face, and his name will be tattooed on their foreheads. Night will be no more. There will no longer be any need of a torch to light the way, or for the light of the sun, because Creator himself, who is their honored chief, will be their light, and they will rule with him to the end, or till the time beyond the end of all days. So yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful selection for tonight. So now we'll be handing it over to Leah for smoke signals and giveaway.
Hey, and one smoke signal I'd like to send up is on the very, I guess it would be the right side of your screen, this lovely lady in the red. This is our honored elder tonight, Casey Church's mother-in-law. This is Alberta Morgan, so Laura's mom.
Yay!
We're so happy to have her here with us today. And if there are any other smoke signals announcements anyone has, you can put them in the chat and we'll read them out. Okay. Someone check out spammers with spam. Okay. All right. Yeah, so if there's any there, let me know. And
I do have one.
All right.
Yes, I was just called today by Terry Wildman, and he invited me to join a podcast that's going to take place on the 15th. And all information is not in yet, but be in prayer. We're going to be talking about the First Nations version. There'll be Terry Wildman, Chris Huckatovi, myself, and another group that's representing some theological division. So keep us in prayer, and that'll be a podcast that we'll probably be able to share on our program here in the future.
Very good. Good deal.
Gene.
Or are we gonna let Gene say that one out loud so people can see who he is here?
I guess, if he wants to, put it in the chat. Leah's calling you out, Gene.
Are you able to speak, or are you in the middle?
Sure. No, I can speak. We're going to be putting together a men's book group. We've been jealous of the ladies and the good studies that they've been doing, so we're going to do a men's book group in the new year. We're going to start by studying Randy Woodley's new book, Mission and the Cultural Other. So if you are interested in that, please let me know, or let Uncle Casey know, or Brian or Leah, somebody, and we'll get you on the list.
Mm-hmm. All righty. And as far as the giveaways, if you would like to support the work of Good Medicine Way financially, you can go to the top of the Good Medicine Way Facebook group, and there's a logo there of how you can click and donate through PayPal. If you'd like to donate another way with a check or whatnot, you can just message us through the chat, or just me on Facebook, Leah Grover. That's a good way to message through there, and I can let you know how to get that to us. And then let's see, what would be the other one? The other one that I would like to invite, as Jean was mentioning, the ladies have their own book discussion group on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And we are going through the lost history of Christianity. Let me see if sometimes Diane has it and she holds it up there. I should probably bring it with me. That'd be a good thing to hold up. But so yes, it's The Lost History of Christianity by Philip Jenkins, which my daughter recommended to me. It talks about the first 1,000 years of Christianity. There we go. There it is. The first 1,000 years of Christianity, when it was very strong in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. And over here in the West, we pretty much just hear about European church history. So this has been very eye-opening. I kind of feel like I've got this, in my 50s, found I've had this long-lost relative I didn't know about, so it's been a very, very good book. So yes, all the ladies are welcome to come Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. You also go to the top of the Good Medicine Way Facebook group page, and on the top left it says Browse. You click on that, and it's got the events link to get to that on Zoom. So if that's it, we can continue.
I think it's kind of funny that you all are reading about the lost history of Christianity and you're talking about Asia, because I often get mistaken for a Chinese lady. So, and I know our Dene relatives often get mistaken for Japanese. So,
Well,
yeah.
China tribe.
All right. So here to introduce our speaker is Casey Church. So go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce our speaker tonight. We have had many chances to meet together through Nate's. I remember one particular time, I forget what the reason for the activity that we had, but everyone had to team up with an individual by you, next to you, and I think it was for a minute straight, we had to look into each other's eyes. And I don't know, a lot of people can't even do that. If somebody looks you in the eyes, you always turn away or move or something, but we were kind of forced into this activity to look into each other's eyes and just experience that for a time. And well, I this really impacted that. If you ever see Damian's eyes up close, he's got some good looking eyes. So I had something very good to look at there. So I want to pull this something up here, and I want to share some things here with you. David Costello received his PhD in theological studies from the University of Dayton and specialized in the intersection of Christian theology, indigenous spiritual traditions, and colonial history. He is an expert on the life and legacy of Nicholas Black Elk and the author of Black Elk, Colonialism and Lakota Catholicism. Costello's works is informed by 5 years of ethnographic work on the Navajo Nation. He serves as the Nate's academic advisor for the PhD. He is associate producer, and he appears in the documentary Walking the Good Red Road, Nicholas Black Elk's Journey to Sainthood. Damian is the founding member of an American co-chair of the Indigenous Catholic Research Fellowship. So it's my honor to introduce Damian Costello.
Thank you, brother. And thank you for that memory. I had forgotten about it, but I definitely remember it. There we go. And I'm always honored, Casey, when you invite me to these kinds of things, in part because I'm Catholic and, I'm a very intentional Christian, but I know that that's a mixed bag. And I know that there's certain things in the Catholic tradition that, Casey, that we've had discussions about, that we've talked about, that are sometimes triggering for you. So I'm very honored that you continue to talk to me and ask me to talk to your friends. And it's always a great opportunity to learn. I was at Good Medicine Way, I guess a month ago. And what a great opportunity to be there in person, to get to see you, and now to return. A little bit about myself. I come to you from Vermont, which is Abenaki territory, or you often hear Abenaki. It's an Algonquin group, and the territory is called Indakina. I'm right sort of in the middle of Vermont in Montpelier, smallest capital in the country, in the US. We're like 8,000 people, only one without a McDonald's. And my background is mostly Polish. I'm 3/4 Polish. I do have an Irish grandfather who gave me the Costello name. But there's a couple of things about Poland that I just recently learned that's just kind of cool. I don't know what it necessarily means. But buffalo, there are bison in Poland, even to this day. One of the few places in Europe where they remain, in a small little national park in the mountains. Sweetgrass is native to Poland, and the Polish name Zebrowka means bison grass, and the national emblem is a white eagle. There's a great little story about how the Polish people came to this territory by following a white eagle. My mother's parents were actually concentration camp survivors. They were brought to Germany, and then after a number of years in refugee camps there, were brought to the US by the Catholic Church. So I always tell people, like, hey, I'm stuck, man. I can't do anything. This is like my heritage, for better or worse. We're a mixed bag, and but I like to honor my ancestors by continuing being part of the Catholic tradition. I would also say that my work, or my life, really, my spirituality, my friendships are informed by 5 years of living on the Navajo reservation in Shiprock, near where you started out, Casey, doing your contextual ministry, and a year also in Red Mesa, which you see in the bottom left there. My wife worked for the Indian Health Service. She's a physician, and we were there up until 2017. Wonderful, wonderful experience, and very important for how I think and how I pray and how I am in the world. But before I get to Black Elk here, real quick, I wanted to start with one of his prayers, a great prayer that he gave at the top of what was Harney Peak, but is now Black Elk Peak. And this was just after he shared his vision. This is 1931. He passed on his vision. I think there's this sense he wasn't sure if he had done the right thing. And he talked about, if there was any power left, there might be some water, some rain. This is in the middle of the summer. And they remember that out of nowhere, perfectly blue sky like you see in the screen, a little cloud appeared, and there was a small drizzle that occurred at the end of this prayer. Grandfather, Tunkashila, great sacred one, you have been always, and before you nothing has been. There is nothing to pray to but you. The star nations all over the universe are yours, and yours are the grasses of the earth. The star nations, day in and day out, you are the life of things. You are older than all need, older than all pain and prayer. Grandfather, all over the world, the faces of the living ones are alike. In tenderness, they have come up out of the ground. Look upon your children, with children in their arms, that they may face the winds and walk the good road to the day of quiet. Teach me to walk the soft earth, a relative to all that live. Sweeten my heart and fill me with light, and give me the strength to understand and the eyes to see. Help me, for without you, I am nothing. Mitakuye Yase. Well, Black Elk is just a remarkable figure for so many different reasons. We're going to talk mostly about his Christian faith. But you should know that he was at the Battle of Little Bighorn when he was 12 years old, finished off a couple wounded soldiers. He went with Sitting Bull to Canada. I always like to say he's a Canadian too. Of course, natives are citizens of Turtle Island, wherever that is, but he did live what is now Canada. And he did grow up in the old ways, following the buffalo. And the most important event happened to him when he was about 9 years old. He was with his people following the buffalo. This was summertime, and he and his friends stopped to get a drink of water at a stream. And in Black Elk, he was dizzy. He sort of collapsed, and he couldn't get up. So they brought him to his parents, and they set up the teepee. The camp stopped, and he fell unconscious for 12 days. But what he remembers is the voices that had been calling him. He had been hearing voices for a couple years now. A sacred voice is calling you. Now is the time. Over and over at different times, very uncertain. He didn't know what to do. But finally, that voice called him here, and he went outside, and this little cloud came down next to him. And these two men with wings led him up into the sky world. And the horse nations of the four directions danced for him, and they brought him to the teepee of the six grandfathers, which I don't need to explain to you, represent all the powers of the universe, right? The six directions. They gave him all sorts of gifts, and they sent him down the black road of destruction where he conquered drought, this big battle, and then down the good red road where at the center of his nation's sacred hoop, he established this sacred tree, this flowering tree. And he looked around, he saw all the different hoops of the other nations, and he jokes, he says, he told this to the interviewer, I don't know if I saw white people there though. And then he found, yeah, no, they were there too. It's all of us. It's this renewal, this entire renewal of creation of all people. So he comes back down to earth. I'm going to just jump through his life in a way that's just very unfair, but we have to for the sake of time. And if there's anything you want to learn about more, I have other talks. I can point you to different resources to fill in the gaps. But this 12-day journey in his calling to renew his people down the red road with the sacred tree was really a template for his lifelong spiritual journey. He was always trying to figure out, am I following my call? Is this how my vision is supposed to be lived out? And he did so in three overlapping ways. Overlapping because there's not always clear where chronologically one stopped and another started. But even when one seems to have stopped, for example, he probably stopped traditional healing in the old ways. It continued in a new form in a Christian context. He continued a healing ministry. And he never stopped promoting and teaching and living the Lakota way, even though there were times where it happened very publicly, very explicitly. So he was definitely a traditional healer from 1881 to 1904. 1904 was the year of his baptism, and at least publicly, he stopped healing. My sense is that this is one part of the missionaries' judgment of his tradition that he did accept, for better or worse. We could have a long conversation about that. But I think that he did stop healing in the traditional way, at least in the same form. I'm sure different prayers and practices did come into his life, particularly at the end. But that's an open debate. He was very prominent in publicly reviving the Lakota way in the face of, as you know, I don't have to explain to you, the boarding school context, the official repression of Native spirituality on the reservation, starting in 1910. And that's a key date because the Black Elk Speaks interview started in 1931. And so you'll often hear people say, like, this was his first opportunity to talk about his Lakota spirituality, and that's where he really came out of his shell. There's clear evidence that from very early on, at least 1910, he was doing things to revive Lakota way, and often in Catholic contexts, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then finally, he walked in the Catholic way from 1904 to his death in 1950. There he is on the right, wearing his suit. He was a catechist or a lay preacher, and at this time, there was this sort of imposition of American standards, and so catechists often wore, a suit, but it did not preclude Native dress in all situations, right? Like here he is with, I have to get this person's name, but they're clearly in a Catholic church, and this man is in full regalia. Well, I think the important thing to understand about Black Elk is that he had a uniquely indigenous understanding of Christ. Most importantly, or I would say the biggest reason being, is because he had his encounter, a very deep and extended encounter with Christ before he ever encountered the reservation colonial church system. He encountered Christ in two different spaces, and I don't have any slides for the first one. In fact, I wasn't even going to cover this, but Brian did this wonderful stuff with the ghost dance. I'm like, I got to do this. I got to put it in, and I'm so glad he did. But first, he spent 3 years in Europe, where he was part of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which he did because you were paid well, you went on an adventure, you had the opportunity to fully inhabit your culture and become a celebrity. But he also said, as a holy person, he wanted to investigate the white world and see if there was anything of value to bring back, if there was any power that the white man had that his people could use. So he spends 3 years there, and he writes letters back. And from the very beginning, he's talking about searching for God. He's like, this is very interesting. They have some interesting customs about God. And of course, he's using his own Lakota term, Wakantanka. And then when he comes back, about 6 months after, students get this who do their study abroad trips, or you all who have done, whether it's like mission trips or service trips or just, traveled for your ministry, that it's not necessarily when you're there that you understand what the importance of your experience is all about or what you need to take back. It's when you go home and you sit with your home context and you're back with your relatives and you're in your own culture that what is important sort of gets distilled. He writes this beautiful letter. He says, it's a very difficult way of life. There wasn't anything that I found other than their customs about God. And he quotes 1 Corinthians 13. And if I was with you in person, I would say, all right, good evangelicals and good Protestants, what is 1 Corinthians 13? And then you would just immediately say, it's Paul's treatise about love. He says, that's what I found. And I think that's what we have to follow. I walk this way now. Now it's always, I have to parse out for non-native audience. And no, he's not saying we didn't have love and we had no idea about it. And thank God we met these white people who told us about love. What he's saying is that, I think this is how I've interpreted over the years, is that there is just this sort of new twist in a new context. And the way I understand it is that it gave him new language to understand the Lakota value of love and compassion in regards to non-Lakota people. Here he is immersed with his conquerors, basically, and he got to know them from the inside. He made genuine friendships. He fell in love, almost brought his girlfriend back home. His neighbor did, Stephen Standing Bear, who did the artwork that you saw, and she became a pillar of the Pine Ridge community. So I think it was a way for Indigenous people to understand their new global identity. How do we make sense of a world that we did not have any sense of, how big it was and how many different people there are? The other way that he has a very unique Indigenous understanding of Christ is to the ghost dance. And it was mentioned before that it comes out of Nevada. Wovoka, a Paiute who had this vision of a native Messiah. He was very influenced in part by Mormon people. And essentially the ghost dance, what it does is it highlights what we heard in that passage from Revelation, the new heaven and the new earth. That the action of Christ doesn't just save our individual souls, which we've often been told, but that it's going to renew the entire cosmos. And so Wovoka's take was that, white people killed Jesus the first time, and now he's coming back, he told me, as an Indian. And I'm going to save my red children. I'm going to bring back the buffalo. I'm going to bring back the dead relatives and heal the land. And so it's based on these passages here where you can look up that talk about the new heaven and the new earth. And what's misunderstood is, so it gets read by colonial officials, particularly in South Dakota, as this militaristic revolution. Like I always tell non-native audiences, like there's two things you could do as a native person at this time that would just totally blow our minds. We'd have no context for it. One of them is you start trying to heal people, right? And we think it's demonic. We think it's just trickery, whatever it may be. And the other is to dance. Non-native people at this time, settler people, almost always interpret native dance in the reservation context as some sort of revolutionary act that entails violence on some level. So there's this story told that the ghost dance is this revolutionary movement in a violent sense. And all the work that's been done all the sources we have of participants, whether they're Lakota, whether they're in Oklahoma, where incidentally, the authorities didn't react that way. Some of them even said, well, this is pretty good. It'll help them convert to Christianity. We should encourage it. But in South Dakota, they didn't feel that way. Voga himself was said to say, like, this is two churches. This is what you do. You live in peace. You do what they tell you to. You work if you can. You send your kids to school, and you go to church. This dance and church, one of the mainline denominations, is like one church, is one way. And of course, this dance is very traditional in the biblical sense of covenant here. I just pulled out a passage from Hosea about God's covenants aren't just with us. That's what Nate has been very good at in explaining and parsing out. It's with all of creation. And that's how the ghost dance understood it. Well, anyway, Black Elk, he comes back just after Europe. He said, in one of his letters, I wanted to go to the Holy Land to see about this Jesus guy in person, to see if really he's what everybody says he was, but I couldn't. It was too far away and cost too much money. And so he gets news of the ghost dance. He's not sure what to make of it. He's still trying to figure out, is this in line with my vision? He tests it out, and he goes and he dances, and he has one of the last major visions of his life of Christ, where he's taken up over the promised land, brought to the sacred tree, and there's 12 men around it. And here is this native man with pierced hands and feet. And he gives him the message, everything has been given to me by my Father, and you must say that, he tells Black Elk. A very clear call. And just real last thought about the ghost dance, I think had so dovetails with traditional Lakota spirituality, and the way that it's understood in a Christian context. So the term for the ghost dance Messiah or Christ is Wanikia, he who makes live. And what's interesting, I'm not sure where it came from first, but both the ghost dance and the mainline denominations, including the Catholic Church, use the word Wanikia for savior. So when Black Elk is in the ghost dance, singing the songs, praying, dancing, or when he's in church, it's the same word. It's the same person. That's how the ghost dancers understood it. There was a high correlation between people who participated in the ghost dance and involvement in churches. Anyway, traditionally, I'm sure you've heard this, the sort of phrase that sums up Lakota spirituality is that you're asking Wakantanka to make the people live, have mercy on us, have pity that we may live. And Wanikia is he who makes live. It doesn't replace Lakota spirituality, but adds to it a regenerative principle. So in the context of all this death and destruction, the spirits come, God sends his son so that people may live again, not erasing, but building on what was there in a very powerful, beautiful way. All right, I think Black Elk's Catholic, Lakota Catholic, traditional spirituality, his spiritual vision was just so beautiful, and it played out in the Catholic spaces in a way that scrambles what we think about all of us, what we think about Catholic spaces, what we think about evangelical spaces, what we think about traditional native spaces. And so the first source, his spirituality was very evangelical. He was a preacher. The Catholics didn't translate the whole Bible. Only the Protestants did. And this was in Minnesota first, the Riggs Dakota Bible. And it seems very likely he got his hands on that and taught himself to read in Dakota, and was known for his ability to memorize and the beautiful way in which he would phrase different images when he preached. He preached in that old style, that oratory style that was used on the plains. And so here he is in that image. He's teaching the children there. They'd have revival type gatherings, and he was not ordained, but 29 out of the 30 days in his community, he was the de facto leader. He would preach, he would baptize the kids if necessary. He called the shots. The second component is sort of devotional Catholicism, which some of you may know about to a certain degree, at least the images. So that's an image of the Sacred Heart. Things like the Rosary were a big part of his spirituality. And we don't have time for it here. This is like a whole other talk. But there was a very unique Lakota take on that, and I think this is true in a lot of different contexts, especially early on, that read these traditions in a way that most of us, like when I grew up, with a rosary, very different than my stereotypes of it. Like, if you told me, like, what's the whitest, most American Catholic thing you could do? It's like, pray the rosary. Well, in Lakota context, this was one of the most popular things the missionaries, the Jesuits who showed up had, because of the connection with beadwork. Native peoples, as you know, loved beads. It was a big trade good. And the idea behind the rosary is you say these repetitive prayers, which can often feel rote, and in a lot of people's hands they are, but you're supposed to be thinking about a deeper story. So as you say it, you're going through the entire life of Christ, the mysteries of Christ. And so this, in an oral culture, there's often these different learning tools that pass on stories and knowledge in a very similar way, that often use physical objects to help people remember what the teachings are. So you think of the winter count, right, where there's a symbol for each year that portrays the most important event, that helps people remember history back for a century, 2 centuries. And so the rosary kind of works that way. Long story short is that Black Elk incorporated these things, but in an indigenous tone. The other thing to say about that is that the Latin chant, he seemed to have engaged with the Latin chant in the way that he engaged with Lakota song. So much to say about that. We'll have to leave it at that for now. That, of course, his traditional Lakota spirituality. And I love this because it's where you would least expect it. This is The Sacred Pipe. It's a book that he wrote. He gave the interviews for very shortly before he died, 47 and 48. And he starts it, this is the preface, and this is how he phrases it. He says, God sent Jesus to restore peace on earth, and I believe that. But everybody should know about Lakota tradition, because it doesn't just help bring peace between people, it helps bring peace between people and the earth. And so right away, he's trying to, I think, speak to the critics that he had in the Catholic Church who weren't too happy with Black Elk Speaks, which came out about 15, 20 years earlier, where he doesn't make mention of his Christian life, and there's some contention about this. Black Elk wrote some letters saying that he wanted to, but the author did not let him, or chose to edit that out. There's some details about that we'll talk about later, just a little bit. Trying to sort of nip this in the bud and say, hey, don't worry, guys. I believe in this Jesus stuff. This isn't against anything that I do. This is for your sake, because this is something that you are missing. That's not contradictory, but actually enlightens and lifts up and sort of completes your spiritual vision. And just to say also real quickly about how his traditional Lakota spirituality fit into his Catholic life. He was limited a little bit, or quite a bit, in that he could not contextualize like we're doing at good medicine way. He didn't have the freedom to say, all right, I'm going to start from scratch. I've got the gospel, I've got my traditions, and we're going to work this out on my terms. He was always limited by the structure of the Catholic Church. So his contextualization was more around the edges, and he also sort of remained a participant in his own Lakota traditions in sort of a organizationally separate from the church, but never from his faith. His faith was always integrated. All right, well, the last third of this talk maybe is Black Elk's Christmas visions. Christmas was always is a very big part of his life, sort of accidentally, I think, and also for important cultural reasons. So I said that this book, Black Elk Speaks, which is the story of his life up until he was 25 years old, until Wounded Knee, the massacre of Wounded Knee, which he participated in. It said that he doesn't mention his Christian life at all. And if you don't know anything about his life, you don't know that. I mean, that sounds correct. But the very first thing he tells you, right here, I was born in the moon of the popping trees, is a very definitive statement about his baptism. Black Elk was not born in December. His physical birth occurred in the summertime, probably in June. He was baptized in December, on December 6th, which is, in Catholic tradition, the feast of St. Nicholas, which is the saint that then becomes transformed into the Santa Claus we know today. Very mixed bag. But it was very common in his community, those who became Christian and found it to be a meaningful part of their life. You know, there's no records, there's no birth certificates. People sometimes don't even know really when they were born. This became their new birthday. And so even though Black Elk did know that he was born in the summertime, he told people this was when he was born into new life. There's this great snapshot of some contextual ministry that he was able to do. This is one of his missionary journeys. He was, again, a very prominent evangelist. He was credited with bringing 400 people to Christ. And he spent at least two long-term missionary trips. One was to the Yankton Reservation, where he could speak. They're intelligible, same language, more or less, just different dialects. But then he also went to the Wind River Reservation, which you probably know is Arapaho and Shoshone. So there was a language difference. And so sign language, so appropriate that we started with some sign language, was one of the main means of communication. Well, one of the times he was there, it was Christmas time, and there was a measles outbreak, and there was lockdown. People couldn't get together. And then, of course, the cultural persecution, right? You can't gather to dance. Those are officially outlawed. So Black Elk had the idea to get a permit for Christmas Eve Mass, midnight Mass, and that they would dance after that in full regalia, have a dance. So the people, and of course, Arapaho and Shoshone, traditional enemies, are learning to live together. It's not always an easy process. They came together and they danced all night after Christmas Eve Mass. And according to his daughter, that later became a tradition for the whole week between Christmas and New Year's. All right, now this is the edgy stuff. Now, Casey, I hope I'm not pushing any buttons here. Trust me on this, I'll do my best. I'm trying to figure out, this what I'm thinking about is how to talk to white folks about this, right? And how to avoid the tendency for people to get too confident in claiming native traditions for themselves, right? Or maybe going into places they shouldn't. To help people to think about these issues within their own context and within the context of who they are. And one thing that's been very powerful for me about being with Nates and Black Elk and Indigenous Christian, Indigenous folks is they've really helped me to think about the practices that I have that are part of my life. And I wondered if there's a sort of reverse contextual ministry that can happen. I know it's happening with me, but is this a sort of ministry and evangelization that could be a bit more explicit? There's a 1908 letter that Black Elk, he's always writing letters in Lakota to Catholic congregations. And this one, he's reporting all the congregations that had their Christmas celebrations, and all of them had Christmas trees, making sure they have Christmas trees. And in fact, one of them, he talks about going to the hill in the middle of the trees where they honored him. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but this was clearly an important tradition. Tree has always been an important symbol for Christians in connection with Jesus, right? It's biblical. Peter, in both of these cases, giving his sermons, talking about how they hanged Jesus on the tree. And that's taken up throughout the tradition. This is St. Theodore's. It's about 900, I think. I got to get the dates on there. I love this quote because it adds a little bit of a Sundance edge there, right? This was the tree upon which the Lord, like a brave warrior wounded in his hands, feet and side, healed the wounds of sin. Well, the Christmas tree has a long history to it and sort of a debate about it, but it does seem clear that just as it was developing, it didn't really start to become prominent until the late Middle Ages. There was the medieval mystery plays where they have these groups that would go around and give plays about salvation history, biblical plays, and they'd have a tree that represented both the tree of life in Eden and the book of Revelation. And that really informed the Christmas tree as it developed. And of course, we remember Black Elk had this vision of the flowering tree that was going to renew all the people. Very, very biblical, associated with the book of Revelation. Well, I came across this account just this last year about a community. I think it's Manderson. It's a Standing Bear, Neva Standing Bear, who talks about their church would honor the Christmas tree in the way with the traditions of the Sundance tree. So they would go and ask permission. They'd make an offering. They'd cut it down. They wouldn't let it touch the ground. And they'd bring it to the church and they decorate it with prayer ties and honor it that way. And then when it was done, they just didn't discard it, but they used it for the sweat lodge, the inipi. Now, that's not to say that they're like doing some sort of Sundance within the church, but that they understood that this was a sacred being that was coming in to pray with you, and you needed to honor it, and you needed to make relatives with it, and that it could help you pray. Well, at the same time, this is all like bouncing around my head. I know I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Robin Wall Kimmerer's work, braiding sweetgrass, talking about plants, and I think helping a lot of us, particularly us non-native people, to what if we take this seriously, that these are beings who we're in relation to and that do particular things for us and with us and change us. I was in a small book group with her. This is COVID summer 2020. It just happened like 10 of us. She joined this library in Vermont, and she mentioned that the balsam tree, which is the most common Christmas tree, that the Anishinaabe name is Ngigidoag, she who stands in prayer for us. I forget, didn't have the ending there. I got to add that. And that really kind of made me think about, well, what's going on when we bring this Christmas tree into our house? I know personally, that's one of the strongest memories I have. In fact, I remember going out behind our house in the woods and getting a tree and bringing it back. I don't know about you, but I know for my family, we're transformed when we gather around the tree, right? There's something about the scent, the traditions, and its presence that we connect in a way that we don't the rest of the year. I'm like, well, that must be that prayer. Praying for us, praying with us. What do I have next? Oh, wow. I even include the music here. Maybe there's a way to sort of reclaim this Christmas tree tradition and add in practices of kinship and reciprocity, similar to that Lakota Christian community. Maybe it's a way for indigenous spiritual values to speak into these non-indigenous places without appropriation, right? I don't know a lot of indigenous Christians who say, all right, I'm going to start passing out pipes to the churches around, non-native churches, so they can start praying in a better way. But maybe with indigenous spirituality and things like Black Elk and these traditions, it can help us in these spaces that already have this practice. Anyway, that's what's kicking around my head in this holiday season. All right, wrapping up here. Black Elk died in 1950. He's remembered as that being a miraculous event associated with it. There was this massive display of the Northern Lights the night of his wake that both Lakota and then the Jesuits took as a miracle. And there's a photo from Toronto Observatory of this. It was like all across North America. I love this quote. Frank Foolscrow, his nephew, great medicine man, last ceremonial chief of the entire Sioux Nation. He says, Black Elk, we consider him to be the highest of all Lakota holy people. And it's not his visions. It's not the great things he did, the healings. It's his character. It's all he wanted to do was love and serve his fellow human beings and fellow relatives, really, we should say. And finally, very last things here, 2016, a remarkable sort of convergence from two different directions. The first is that Harney Peak was changed to Black Elk Peak, which stemmed from a vision that this is Basil Braveheart had a couple years before that, where he felt Black Elk came to him in a very dark place. I can tell that story some other time. And this is Black Elk's grandson. I didn't point out that he was in the photo with Black Elk in regalia there, the young boy. He used to work with Black Elk in the Black Hills, putting on a pageant, teaching Lakota spirituality and culture to tourists, sort of returning to be a showman like the Wild West show in his later years. They brought a petition for the cause of canonization at this time, and that is in the second phase. There's 4 phases in the Catholic Church for canonization. So we're hopeful that the Catholics I know are hopeful that'll go forward. And I would just say the last very final thing, I love how Basil Braveheart talks about it. He likes to say that when they changed the name, General Harney was not a good man. He was first massacre of Lakota people was General Harney was the leader. He was also known for beating a slave girl to death. And so he says when that name was changed, it wasn't just that, there's sort of just an attitude shift among the people, that changed the land. Like the land itself, we're calling up the land to be what it was. And that the canonization is an extension of that. It's an extension of Black Elk's vision going out into the world that started in the land with this mountain. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Let's give him a hand.
Did I stop sharing it, or is it still my?
It's still shared.
Let's see.
What's that?
Yeah, it's still shared right now.
Okay. All right, you can start the questions, and I will figure out how to. Oh, here we go.
So I think before we officially hand over the question and response to Brian, I just wanted to share a little bit with you. I'm actually a descendant of Black Elk through my father, Oglala Nashikangu Itahan.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought it was really beautiful, and it's amazing that we're here in Albuquerque to hear your sharing. I always call myself unique too, so I thought that was really cool how you're like uniquely something and understanding and creator. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there that me and Kisa are actually descendants of Black Elk. My grandma was Sharon Black Elk. She was married to a Black Elk man. And I'm also a descendant of Red Cloud as well. My grandma kind of joined the forces.
Wow. That's some big names there. Wow.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there, and I just appreciate what you had to share, and just being able to learn a little bit more about my ancestor through what you have shared. And I just wanted to share a quick little song that I was thinking of when I went outside to offer tobacco. And if that's all right with everybody? Yeah? Okay. It's a Sundance song as far as I know. I'm not really sure what all the words mean, but here we go. Tonkashila, tonkashila, namakuo. Tonkashila, tonkashila, namakuo. Namakuo. Oshia che che lo namakuo. Tonkashila, tonkashila, namakuo. Tonkashila, tonkashila, namakuo. Namakuo. Oshia che che lo namakuo. La, 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 la. So thank you for sharing so much about Black Elk. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Yes, and I'm going to pass it over to Brian for the Q&R.
Yeah, so as we normally do, just if you have a question or a comment, shout it out, or if you're on one of the live streams, type it in, and then we'll try to share it. And if we get a lineup of people, then I'll try to keep track of the order and go through. So yeah, so we can open up the floor. It looks like Casey's got something.
Yeah, I thought I better get my word in there because there'll probably be several people speaking. No, you didn't trigger me on anything there, Damian. Many of the things you talked about, I've already delved into, and with other people over time. Also going out to Sundance and experiencing the whole ceremony as well, and seeing all of the things that parallel ways that we can incorporate. But if Richard was still around, he would have been the one to step into that world and then contextualize his world. But a Potawatomi going into that world can't say I can bring that, but I can bring my Potawatomi things in and do that. But back in the day here, when Richard did a program there for 10 years, he passed after seven of those years, and I picked it up. But we did a cultural immersion in the Lakota land there. We went through 10 different groups. Namara was one of those groups, and others that have gone through that program. And it wasn't until I think the second to last year, Corky Alexander, who had done a lot of research out that way, came across the St. Ignace Catholic Church, and then also coming across Black Elk's grave. So we were able to go and with our groups go out and experience that. And it's only about a mile away from the Wounded Knee. So that was also part of our program, as well as Red Cross School and many other things that we incorporated into that. But using the tree, there are so many images there, especially when I'll just bring some things out as far as, piercing. As a Lakota thing, Jesus was pierced for us. So when they go to the tree, they pierce themselves as kind of doing something to be more like Christ, he pierced. And then the string connected to the tree is, abide in me, stay connected to me. Staying connected to the tree is a way of connecting with God continually. One of the things I've seen is that they always pick a tree that with the arms of the tree are reaching to the heavens. They never pick trees with the limbs that are hanging down. They always pick the ones that are reaching to the heavens. But there were just so many things. And here in Albuquerque, from the first 6 years of my time here in Albuquerque, we sang with the Lakota drum group, and we sang Sundance songs, and we prepared our Sundancers to go to Sundance. And then we also did ceremony with them. But numerous other things. The tree, this is the last one. A friend of mine, he grew up in the traditional way. we always used cedar. And he had cedar boughs, and they laid cedar in the sweat lodge as a mat to sit on. And then when he became a believer, he was told that you could no longer use those things anymore. You had to put that cedar away. You can never touch those anymore as any part of your Christian life. And then when Christmas came along, they brought the whole tree in. And he could never, he says, what in the world? You say I can't bring my my cedar in, but you can bring your cedar in, and you can also decorate the whole church with these boughs and all the garland throughout with the sacredness. But so there is a way that you can already see that there's a way that Native people can connect. There's too many last things I could say. the use of the rosary when we make prayer ties. And we make miniature prayer ties, and that is a way of kind of a symbolic way of doing a rosary. I don't know how many beads are on a rosary, but in a traditional way of doing prayer ties, you could make hundreds of small prayer ties, and not doing a rote saying for each prayer tie, but you would do an individual prayer for each prayer tie that you made. So you might do one for every member of your family, one for every medicine that grows, and every people group that's on earth, and then all the way through until you get hundreds of them in a long string of prayer ties. That is a symbolic way of seeing a contextual use of the rosary. But I have thought these things over and over, but I'm not the one to incorporate them. But there's some things that Good Medicine Way can think about in the future, how we can do that. The problem with cutting down trees is that I like the way artificial trees are made. If you ever see, you pull out the boughs that are inside the box of an artificial tree, I think rather than cut a living tree down and throwing it away 2 weeks later, or putting it into mulch, or throwing it on the side of the road, is that we don't cut down, 150,000 trees, celebrate, a dead day of the winter solstice, more or less. Yeah, let's leave those living, but then take boughs from a living tree and create a tree from that, and then hang your prayer ties on that tree. But let the living, if we believe in deforestation, every year at this time, we cut down millions of trees to commemorate our faith. So that's enough from my end here.
Thank you. Just at the very end, that's one thing I struggle with too, in terms of cutting down a living tree. And I know, like, my kids and I, we've started to say, okay, well, we cut down a tree, we have to act on that. It's our responsibility. If we have a relationship, we've got to plant some, and we've got to take care of the ones that are here in an intentional way, right? I can see that it's changing how we engage with the land and those trees that are around us, and how we want to be active participants. So I think I'm hopeful that if we get people to engage this tradition in the correct way, they'll start making this a part of their spirituality and their way of life, to cultivate our relatives and support them. But yeah, I mean, if we just go cutting down and that's it, that's not the answer.
One of the reasons that I bring that up is that I posted a picture of a truckload of cut down trees that were heading to the city. And then all I could think of is that all of those trees are going to end up in the trash. They're going to end up as mulch, or they're going to end up as not even cared for on the side of the road. There's probably 500 trees on that truck heading to the city, and they're going to be sold. There's a whole message that could be preached from the Bible about how Paul was preaching about the idols, and that when he said don't use the idols, they got all upset because they said this is part of our livelihood. So people that are selling the 500 trees for $100 a piece, It's like, this is part of our livelihood. And Casey is saying, don't do this anymore. We should, let's stone Casey.
Well, we don't want that. I see there's some questions about the ghost dance and the sun dance. And you're right. I don't think I was very clear about that. The sun dance was something that existed for a long time before contact and before the reservation period. The ghost dance came later with that vision from Wovoka had, and then spread out. And it was very relatively new. And so those are two different traditions. The sun dance is the one, it's like a week long with 4 days of dancing, prayer and fasting the whole time. People are often pierced and offer their flesh as part of that. And that does not happen in the ghost dance.
Recommended watch Lakota Woman because that will teach you a lot about it, or watch Thunderheart. Those
Yes.
two movies, they highlight ghost dance, so you can kind of understand what it means. But yeah.
One thing I found kind of interesting was when you were talking about the ghost dance and how just the way of oppressive regimes, that they're always in fear because they understand that they're oppressing people. And then they always kind of project their own approach to things onto other people. And so that's why when you have, like, when the ghost dance, which was really this attempt to bring healing and restoration, that the oppressive regime of the colonial people immediately just said, like, no, that must be some secret way that they're getting ready to attack us and make more war. Like, they couldn't believe that, like, that these people that are just like these people that we've been oppressing, that they're doing this big ritual just to try to bring healing to the land. Like, that must be a secret thing that they're doing. And so then they create, all these things around it that are just like completely false. And I don't know, to me, that's always an interesting thing. You see that kind of thing happen a lot.
Because the ghost dance is more like like where you're bringing back your ancestors. You're bringing back those who left you. You're bringing their spirits back to dance with them and gain the strength from them. You're not actually bringing them back to start war. It's just having their spirits there with you is the main thing. And it's like where you can feel close to them. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a renewing kind of thing, like something that you can bring back all those people, learn from them, whatever they're trying to tell you while you're dancing. I don't know, the other day, I want to say like maybe a month or so ago, I was getting really into listening to ghost dancing songs because I felt like I was like a ghost. I felt like I was kind of like this weird empty shell, like a vapor or something. But yeah, so if you want to check it out and learn more, like how I said, Lakota Woman, Thunderheart, look up the ghost dance songs on YouTube. Yeah, they have a few things that are available for you to learn about it. And so, yeah.
And if anyone else has a question, they can jump in, but I could maybe finish with a Black Elk ghost dance story that I did not include. He was not there at the initial massacre, but he heard the shots like a lot of people around. And so he showed up and he participated in the battle. The battle went on for a number of days after the first massacre. And for example, there was fighting near the Catholic mission where Black Elk eventually was baptized. And there were some people who wanted to, there were some Cheyenne visiting who, out of frustration from what happened, wanted to wipe out the mission. Some other Lakota people said, no. We're going to protect these people because we don't want you to injure yourself too by killing innocent people. But so Black Elk rushed into the battle with the soldiers, and he was wounded in the stomach. And so he retreated, and they tied up his stomach with blankets so that his intestines wouldn't come out. And he wanted to go back and die. He says that I didn't want to live anymore. And he was going to make a suicide charge, and he was ready to go, say the great Hoka-hey, the crazy horse war cry. And an elder grabbed him and held him back. He knew that Black Elk was special. He had a special vision. He said, "No, nephew, we need you so that the people may live." And it's because of that one elder that Black Elk survived, and we have all of this.
I know it's a lot for us to process.
Mhm.
I know we all have a lot of questions going through our minds.
Mhm.
I see Joe over there scratching his head. Just kidding. You're muted, Jamie.
Thank you. I knew there was something I was forgetting. I just wanted to thank you for your teaching. I really admire Black Elk a lot, and I read his book, Black Elk Speaks, a long time ago. But I learned so much more today from your teaching about him. So I was just really, really blessed by it. And I appreciate what everybody shared about the ghost dance, because that's something I've wondered about. I've heard a little bit about it here and there, but just never really understood it that well. So I feel like I really learned a lot about that. So I really appreciate what everyone shared about the ghost dance. And finally, I appreciate what you guys shared about the tree, relating especially to Christmas, because that was actually something I've been thinking about the last few days. It's interesting because just a few days ago, I was having a conversation with some friends who were talking about, the pagan origins of Christmas and how they don't celebrate Christmas. They don't even decorate their houses with anything Christmas. And I understood where they were coming from, but I kind of had mixed feelings about it, because I was thinking to myself, a tree itself is not evil. And I was just actually really thinking that as believers, as Christians, we have the power to redeem things. Being in Christ, seated in heavenly places, we have the power to redeem things that may have been used inappropriately, because it's in the kingdom of darkness takes things that God created that are good and tries to twist them, for its own evil purposes. But we have the power to redeem those things and to bring them back to their proper place and their proper purpose. So, and I was just thinking, instead of thinking it as a Christmas tree, thinking of it as a tree of life, and celebrating in that sense, so that we can, redeem that and take it back for, its rightful purpose, to celebrate life and to celebrate Christ. So those are just my thoughts about it. But thank you again for your teaching and what everybody shared. I appreciate it.
I also want to make mention, I just happen to have a signed copy from our host tonight here. So thank you for that, Damian. Get back to Brian.
There is a question about Casey's NAGPRA talk. Would that be all right to put that in, or?
Where do you see that?
It's actually on the Facebook page. They said, this is Heavenly Scott. She asks, how do we go about unearthing privatized land?
Yeah, I think that's also one of the topics, is that the United States government has, what's the word? Eminent domain, as far as when it comes to lands that are private, that even if you own private land, they can make a road through it or run a railroad track through it. And so they also, I would think that there's probably possibilities that they also have jurisdiction over the NAGPRA issue and the bodies or artifacts that are there. So.
You don't dig up our graveyards, we won't dig up yours. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
It's such a double standard there. Yeah. So,
It's a quote from Lakota woman, from those original AIM members.
what's the other one? Not today, colonizer.
Yeah.
Today.
Looks like Andrew had mentioned Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee as another movie that talks about Wovoka and the ghost dance. So
check that one out too.
Yeah, and there's Neither Wolf Nor Dog is that deals with some of the NAGPRA issues, and it's a really good movie too. Just in general, it's a really good kind of introduction to Native culture and Native thinking, specifically Lakota stuff. So it's yeah, it's a good one too. Let's see what else we got going here. I really liked what you said, Jamie. I think it's a good reminder that as followers of Creator Sets Free, we are inherently involved in the action of redemption and restoration, and that if we just go through anything that's been twisted towards evil at some point in history, just say, okay, we can't do that anymore, that, you know, eventually everything's just going to rust away and there's going to be nothing left. So just recognizing that our position in Christ, when we're in the motion of what the Spirit of Creator is doing in the world, we're inherently going to be involved in movements of restoration and redemption. So yeah, that was a good word. I was really glad you brought that up.
Thanks for that feedback. I appreciate it.
All right, so we've got a lot of people on here. I'm sure somebody has a thought or a question or an insight concerning Black Elk. We've got a lot of great minds on.
Is Joe just waving at us? or would you like to
Joe's
talk?
waving.
I was trying to come up with a nice question. No, maybe doesn't make any sense. But Damian, I was curious. Thank you. Actually, thank you for your work and your presentation and your relationship with the story and the people, and then coming and sharing that with us. My question is, I always try to break things down into practical terms. So my question is, how has your work, your relationship with the story and the people, has that impacted you in your faith walk / in terms of like the corporate side of things? I'm curious to know kind of like how that has, if that has bled into that side of your life.
So corporate, do you mean like business, money?
No, like
corporate,
church,
like people.
Big C church.
Oh, Big C church. Yeah, no, definitely. It took a long time. So I did my research and writing. It was finished in like 2005 for that book. And nobody cared at that point, really, other than this strange group of people called Nates. I wrote to them and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you be interested in, like a paper on it or something? And Terry wrote back at me. He's like, you should come give the plenary talk. I'm like, okay. So I did. And, but in terms of like academia and the Big C church, the Catholic Church, there was not really any interest until 2016. And I always thought, if somebody had told me in 2010, 2000, whatever, like they're going to make Black Elk a saint, or people are going to be interested in that, I would have said, you're out of your mind. There's going to be too many people who say, no pagans in my church, right? I just didn't think that people would be ready for that. And I've been very surprised that a lot of people across the spectrum have been interested and very supportive of it. So to answer your question, starting with that canonization process, I've had a lot more people who want to talk to me, are interested in hearing about this. And increasingly within the Big C church. Now, I don't have to probably explain too much to you that there's a large group of people who don't want to think about, our history, and don't want to take seriously the responsibilities of doing things better. But anyway, long story short, yes, more and more people are interested in this message is moving.
I'd like to add
Mhm.
two little bits. If you could
Yeah.
talk to these 2 points there, Damian.
Yeah.
It's that the Catholic Church. Tell us about, the Kateri circles.
Mhm.
Very Kateri Tekakwitha. I know, she's a saint, but the contextualization that the Kateri circles do. And also, secondly, your connection with Nate's and your position as the director of the cohorts for the PhD.
Sure. So the Kateri Circle started, their contextualization work probably started in the 70s, I would say, where started really thinking about doing the kind of thing that you're doing a good medicine way in Catholic circles. Now we have, in some ways, greater impediments to that because we have a very strict liturgy that, we have to have the Eucharist, we have to have the different parts of the Mass. We have an ordained clergy, but the Kateri Circle worked to bring in smudging, for example, native language, other practices, some places even the pipe, though that's less common now. And that's still happening in different parts of the country in North America and in different contexts. So we're hopeful that the Kateri groups they are taking up the Black Elk cause, and hopefully that will push the cause forward. Now, my work at Nate's, I'm the director of postgraduate studies, very fancy term, but basically I help steward the PhD program. We have a new PhD program that started 3 or 4 years ago, and we have our own independent accreditation. We have currently about 12 students, about 3 that are getting close to finishing, graduating. Our first ones hopefully in 2023. Donnie Begay being one of them, who's in Albuquerque there, I think a friend of Good Medicine Way. And we're trying to think all this out in an academic level, right? Bring indigenous spirituality and theology to the highest levels of academia. And there's been so much more receptivity to that in the last 5 years, I'd say, particularly the last 2 years. And we have students from across the globe and conversations with universities and partnerships with universities across the globe. So exciting work. I feel like I've been blessed to have, a few years ago, I was having these conversations mostly to myself, and now I'm in the middle of all this at Nate's, talking about the Good Medicine Way, life in Christ in a native way, and it's beautiful.
Thank you. Brian?
All right, Namar's got his hand up. Go ahead, Namar. Well, I don't know. Well, while we're waiting to see if Namar will come in, there was a question on the YouTube stream where someone noted that there is a history of natives in the Catholic Church, and she was just wondering why is there such a pushback of having natives recognized within the Catholic Church, like how you were saying, like how you found it really surprising that like Black Elk would even be considered,
Well, in Black Elk's case, he's known globally for his native spirituality, his Lakota life, right? people just know about him from Black Elk Speaks prior to up until 5 years ago. And so most people, including me, when I first heard about Black Elk, I had no idea it was Catholic or Christian. I read Black Elk Speaks, I loved it. And it was only when I walked into class one day, this is 1995, the professor saw the book and said, Damian, great book, huh? Do you know he was Catholic? And I was like, I couldn't even put those two things together. And so my thinking was that would just be too hard for people to get past. Even when they found out that he was a dedicated Christian, that they would still think, no. What's really important to him is this pagan stuff. And of course, that's like a very problematic, awful way of saying it. It would be so hard for them to get out of that perception. But I'm continually surprised that there's more and more people that defy my stereotypes. Like I would say, like, is everybody there? No. But there's lots of people who I would never expect who are yearning for this kind of teaching and this spirituality. And I would say that the biggest resistance has to do with the political stuff now. It's less about the spirituality, I think. It's more about, the difficulty that some people have of owning the boarding school history and the fear that they're going to lose money or land to natives, right? That's what's really at issue. And so I don't know if that's going to change or how that's going to change, but I do see Black Elk and that witness having an effect, and Nate's and people like Casey and you're making a difference. Let's face it. I mean, this is just a beautiful way to live and to see the world and to see God. And when people have an authentic encounter with it, it's really hard to say no. I think people are afraid, and it's hard to get past that fear. But once you're there, why would you ever go back?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like the church on this continent has really suffered by marginalizing those voices and perspectives, and I think now you're really seeing like the deficit that causes within the church.
Yeah.
And that we really, the church desperately needs to hear those voices, and not just hear those voices, but empower those voices. Or else it's just going to slowly dwindle away. But,
Yeah.
I think mine might have come back.
yeah, are you, I'm not sure if your hand's up on purpose or not, Namar, and if you were trying to talk before the, you.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we.
Yeah, I was trying to speak earlier, but I'm in a bad service area. So, but you can hear me now?
Yes. Speak
right,
your
thank
piece
you.
while you can.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I said, speak your piece while we can still hear you.
Yes, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Damian, for your teaching. I'm very grateful of this. And I actually have the book of Black Elk Speaks, but I didn't finish it. But there's two things that quickly jump out to me. Is that I remember in a section in the book, I don't remember exactly where, but there was a native, maybe it was Black Elk, I'm not sure, but there was a native who was doing a traditional cultural like dance or something along those lines, something cultural. And then there was a priest that immediately went to that native person and then just sort of like admonished him and acted as if he was doing an exorcism.
Yeah.
So there's that one thing. And then with that, I remember you mentioned about reverse contextual.
Yeah.
You mentioned that earlier. So my thoughts on that is that I'm just not sure if that actually exists. And I say that because I'm thinking that every Christian from their respective ethnic groups has at some point in time, or at least has the opportunity to be contextual and to follow Christ within their own cultural way. And that is just that even now with the white European, and Casey and I have talked about this more than once, even with the white European, that is contextual in their own way. Like they have worshiped and taught about Christ through their cultural European ways. It's just that the problem is they have been so dominant and forceful that they have made that the standard, and that anything like that is just not actually following Christ. But I believe that each and every one of us culturally, and we especially learn this from the natives, is that we can very well encounter Christ through our own cultural way, however that may be. And that was something that Richard had emphasized, especially hence his book, One Church, Many Tribes, honoring the creator the way God made you. So when I think about any reverse contextualization, I kind of look at it as that with that phrase reverse racism, which I don't believe there's reverse racism. I believe you're either racist or you're not, even though your reasons for being racist may differ from another person's reasons. Likewise with contextualization, I believe you're either contextual or you're not, but you definitely have a chance to be contextual. It's implanted in you from whatever culture or ethnic group that you come from. It's implanted in you. It's just that either you're going to let that manifest or you're going to follow what has been enforced. So what you thought?
Great
Thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely. Too many to get in here, but the second one first about the idea of reverse contextualization. I mean, I think we might be talking about sort of the same thing. My idea is not, is to look back at all of our own traditions. So I'm speaking now, let's just take Northern Europeans, for example. That's where my people come from, right? And to look at through this lens of indigenous spirituality, what remnants are there? Now, this is one thing that I believe, and I've heard lots of other people say this, like at one point, some of us much further back, we were all indigenous to a certain place and had sort of analogous practices that were similar, right? So for example, in Northern Europe, there was sweetgrass and it was used in a very similar way. Like there's the Sami people who are still there today still use it, but Germans, Polish people, Swedish people, Norwegian people used sweetgrass as a medicine. And that survived in Christian contexts early on to the degree that they would bring it into the church and like sprinkle it in the church on saints' days. And it became known as Mary's grass. And so there was just this spiritual practice, a contextualization there that is similar to what is happening in North America, but it's like long forgotten in a lot of cases. So what I would encourage people to think about, and this is what I'm thinking about, is okay, how can I re-engage that tradition? Because that's my genetic history, not by taking it from somebody else, but by looking back in the history and imagining what it was and how could it appropriately inform my spirituality here, right? So I guess digging back deep as we can for those roots that still might be there, but we just don't see very often. And I think the other place that this is it's much closer is Irish spirituality. So much of the Celtic spirituality is very, very indigenous in a very similar way. And I think a lot of white folk have looked at that as an opportunity for them to start thinking more holistically about the creator and creation in our faith. So I guess that's what I would be saying. I would see myself as sort of speaking into what Richard is talking about, right? Each people has been given something, and just some of us have forgotten it like centuries in the past. I'd also say that some of the older Christianities, the traditions of like the Orthodox Church and like the older Catholic stuff, like our use of incense, for example, right? Unfortunately, you Protestants, you were told all that stuff is bad, right? You can't smudge. Well, I go to my church on the weekend, we're smudging all the time. And we have been. In fact, we did it a lot more a couple centuries ago before we decided to get more modern and more Protestant. So there are practices within the Christian tradition that are very similar, that we still have, and that we can go back to without taking from other people. The first one, great memory, Neymar, about that story you talk about. And we can't unpack it all here other than to say that was, a common experience for a lot of Native people in various denominations, and something that Black Elk experienced. He did experience that in a healing ceremony. A Jesuit came in, stopped it, looked at it as like a pagan, demonic thing, and stopped it. And, say as a Catholic, there's nothing to say in defense of that. Just to like tell that story and own it and say, hey, that was part of colonial Christianity that Black Elk encountered. And I know some people would take that as sort of definitive evidence that his experience couldn't have been authentic. He couldn't have really bought into that tradition because of that experience, or that tradition is just not worth taking seriously. And I understand those sentiments. I also think that his example is one of incredible strength to endure something like that and to own his faith and to push back. Like there's this one story. Sorry, I'm going on long here, and I'll wrap this up in a minute. But there was a great variety of clergy, just like in all traditions. Some were learned Lakota language, very adapted to Lakota culture. Some were a-holes. They didn't have any use for it. And there's this one story that his granddaughter remembers, where this priest was mad at him, came in and said something or did something, and Black Elk pushed back. It's like, you can't do that to me. He was not anybody who was going to get pushed around. And anyway, I can go on forever and ever, but that's sort of the mixed bag that this history has, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. And it's Namar, by the way.
Namar, okay.
Yeah, but thank you for articulating that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the questions.
Any questions in the house here? Okay.
Hi, Miles. It's Mommy. My baby's watching on YouTube. He wanted to see Mommy, so I'm saying, hi, Milesy. Hi. But yeah, this has been a really, really beautiful discussion, and I'm so glad that that we were able to have this and to be able to talk about my ancestor. Like I said, me, Kisa, and Milesy's ancestor. So, hi, baby. Hi. Mommy misses you. We'll be home soon.
Petadaka, you're gonna have to just come out here and move to Albuquerque. You're great. You're a great connection with us there. That's really, really cool. I want to teach us one thing as we close out here, Brian. I learned some time ago is that a sign language for applause is the waving of hands back and forth. So rather than us doing this, that's whenever we applaud Damian here, let's do this. Yeah, that's showing that we're applauding in the sign language. So thank you, Damian.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So are we moving on to our ending segment now?
I think so.
All right. So I'll pass it back over to the Grovers for the closing song, Gonaronkwa. Take it over.
All right, so yeah, this is a Jonathan Miracle song we do often. And if you didn't know, Gonaronkwa is how you say I love you in Mohawk. And so that might If you didn't know that, that might help you to, sorry, I'm trying to do three things at the same time. I might bring some new insight to the lyrics as we go. And feel free to dance and sing along at home, whichever way the Spirit moves you to worship as we do our closing song.
Yeah, Andrew, take it away. Work it out. Dance. Hey.
Yes, sir. Gotta run far. Yes, sir. Gotta run far. Yes, sir. Gotta run far. Higher, way higher. Yes, sir. Gotta run far. Higher, way higher. Yes, sir. Yahweh, gotta run far. Yes, sir. Yahweh, gotta run Jesus is good medicine, gotta run Jesus is good medicine, gotta run Yes, sir. Gotta run higher, way higher. Yes, sir. Gotta run higher, way higher. Yes, sir. Yahweh, gotta run Yes, sir.
We had my little baby girl dancing over here. She was working it. Just like she does every single time. You guys finally got to see it. Okay, now we'll be coming over to Preston Jones to give us our send-off blessing.
Can I just say something real quick? For some reason, my chat isn't working. I can't respond to people have been sending thank yous and questions, and I apologize. I just can't respond, but I see it, and I thank you.
Technology. Yeah.
Battling all the time.
All right, Preston, you there? Sorry, I'm waving to my little baby over there. I don't know if he's still there.
Okay.
Right.
We're good to go. I had to disconnect the Bluetooth to disconnect from the earphones because we do not like those earbuds. Remember that. Okay. And Andrew, please accidentally have your video on again. Yes, we love it.
Yes.
um, such a great, interesting way to learn so many different new stories and new ideas about blackout. I mean, I have not done a deep dive, and I'm realizing I should and need to do a deep dive on Black Elk and understanding how much to learn and understand how to grow from his ideas. So with that, let's come together in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful teachings and these wonderful moments of being able to come together as a family and joke around. Thank you for being able to have our chosen family be able to be rooted in you, have your love be able to spread out to us in many different ways, beyond only different different five languages. There are more for us. There are so much more than just the five natural languages, but we are able to communicate so much more because you are teaching us, you are allowing us to learn, you are allowing us to be able to grow and be able to have the harsh truth be of trimmings and being able to understand when are we being hard and harming ourselves. Let us breathe. We breathe in you. We breathe in your love, in your light, to bring oxidize our kindling, to brighten our fire, so we can continue doing the work that you have called us to do. Bless our week, bless our nights, and we'll bless each other and bless new members of the extended family for the week. In good name we pray. Amen. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Damian. Thank
Have a
everyone.
great week, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you next week. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. Bye, Milesy. I'll see you in a couple hours, baby.
Welcome all to the new faces and also to our Facebook people too. We want to welcome them as well. Thank you.
Oh, and I should say who's next week. Next week, tune in again for Vince Bantu. Ooh, that should be awesome. Yeah, a lot of people know who he is. Yes, expert on like ancient African Christianity, and that'll be a blast. So we'll see ya all.
All right. Thank you so much. See you all next week.
Bye all.
Bye.
Very